Story recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain a comedy, fantasy, and horror film called All Cheerleaders Die. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. At home, high school student Maddie watches video footage of her friend, Alexis, explaining how dangerous cheerleading can be. She playfully looks at the camera, twirling her hair and flaunting her sexy uniform while also judging the appearance of other students. Adding to Alexis' popularity is her boyfriend, Terry, the football team captain. Their practice then starts, and the cheerleaders perform perfect choreography and mesmerizing acrobatics. However, Alexis breaks her neck and dies when her teammates miss her after tossing her into the air. 3 months later, Terry starts dating another cheerleader, Tracy. Meanwhile, Martha arrives at school with her boyfriend, Manny, and her shy sister, Hannah. At the football field, recruitment begins to take Alexis' spot on the team. However, when the aspirants get called one by one name catches everyone's attention. Looking entirely different, Maddie shows up there for the tryouts. Confused, Tracy and Martha pull her aside to ask what she's doing. Since Maddie was close with Alexis, she tells them she also wants to try cheerleading. As the audition goes on, the cheerleaders are impressed with Maddie's dancing and gymnastics skills. Ultimately, she makes the squad, and the cheerleaders celebrate with her. However, in her room, Maddie reveals that her personality change is just a facade. She holds a grudge against the cheerleaders for how they seem to not care about Alexis' death, especially Terry, who currently dates his dead ex-girlfriend's best friend. Determined to avenge Alexis, Maddie vows to ruin their senior year of high school. Moments later, Maddie changes her clothes and leaves the house to meet the other cheerleaders. She then encounters her ex, Alina, who is determined to save their relationship. She doesn't understand Maddie's abrupt change and desire to become a cheerleader, but Maddie won't even talk to her. Then, as Maddie avoids Lena, she fails to see that the girl has slipped something in her bag. Stopping the confrontation, Tracy arrives to pick Maddie up, leaving Lena alone. Lena is then forced to go home, but before she leaves, she first does a ritual with her magical stones. At a pool party, only Martha wears conservative clothes because she's overly religious. Meanwhile, Tracy talks to Maddie by the pool and says she feels ashamed about dating Terry. She reveals that she's liked Terry even before but insists that she never acted on it. Then, suddenly, the football team arrives, infuriating Martha because they aren't invited. Terry then manages to calm Martha down and gives a bracelet to Tracy, which she proudly shows to Maddie later. A bit disturbed, Maddie tells Tracy that he saw Terry cheating on her with another girl. Upset, Tracy drinks more than she can handle and gets drunk later in her car. Maddie tries to comfort Tracy like a good fake friend, but Tracy's too busy drowning in self-pity. So, Maddie steals her phone and sends Terry an insulting text, unaware that Terry is watching them from a distance. Eventually, Tracy stops crying and kisses Maddie, and the two girls remain clueless that the football captain can see everything they're doing. Later that night, Maddie takes Tracy to her house and decides to walk home. As she does, she realizes she has a little straw doll in her bag and quickly throws it away. She also notices a car following her, but when she stops to see if she can recognize the person behind the wheels, the driver suddenly speeds away. The next night, Lena follows Maddie to another party at a cemetery. Hurt, she watches Maddie having the time of her life with her new friends. Meanwhile, Tracy and Maddie have gotten closer after sharing a kiss. On the other hand, Martha acts cold towards Manny, so Hannah tries to comfort him. However, she only gets denied by the guy she likes and his silly friends. Disappointed, Hannah walks away from the football players and later sees Lena from a distance. When Hannah approaches Lena, who's fiddling with her stones, she gets curious. At first, Lena pushes her away but ends up letting her watch. They then begin a ritual that will fulfill Hannah's wish. As Hannah throws the stones, Lena reads them and tells her to focus on what she wants. However, she also warns Hannah of the consequences of the spell. Still, Hannah goes through with it and glances at Manny before making her wish, hoping it will come true. Meanwhile, Tracy gets rid of her bracelet and continues to have fun with Maddie. As they talk, Maddie notices that Lena is watching them and decides to make her jealous by hugging Tracy and inviting her somewhere quiet. Lena then follows the girls and watches them make out, leaving her crying and hurt. With nothing else to do, Lena returns to Hannah and grabs the stones just as one of them begins to glow, yelling at her to go away. Later on, Terry arrives at the cemetery and gets even more pissed upon seeing Tracy and Maddie laughing. As the football captain, Terry announces that his teammates are no longer allowed to fraternize with the cheerleaders. Terry also threatens to bench Manny the entire season if he stays with his girlfriend, so he reluctantly leaves Martha. Speechless, the team has no choice but to follow. After all, cheerleaders aren't the only attractive girls in school. Upset, the girls try to leave, but Maddie encourages Tracy to stand up to Terry. Tracy then insults Terry's skills in bed, and eventually, the football captain ends up punching her. Shocked, Maddie tells Terry to kiss his football season goodbye before urging the other guys to do something. However, when nobody moves, Martha decides to call the cops. Unfortunately, Terry is too quick and steals her phone. Tracy then rushes at Terry, and the team gets in between them before things get even more ugly. As the girls leave to report Terry, he and his boys chase after them. Along the way, they pass Lena, who's still crying. Meanwhile, Martha speeds up to avoid Terry's wrath, only to crash the car right through the railings and fall into the river. One of the football players, Vic, is horrified and wants to save the girls, but his teammates stop him and tell him they need to go. On the other hand, Lena rushes to help the girls while Terry and his buddies flee the scene. In the river, Lena breaks the car's window and carries all the cheerleaders to safety. Crushed, Lena throws away her pouch of magic stones and holds Maddie's lifeless body in her arms. As she does this, the girl's blood flows toward the stones, so Lena raises her hand to the moon and bites herself before feeding the stones her blood, too. Once Lena begs Maddie to come back to her, each stone enters the girl's wounds and revives them. Subsequently, another stone attaches itself to Lena. The following morning, Maddie wakes up at Lena's house. Also with them are the other cheerleaders, and when Tracy awakens with an odd amount of strength, she accidentally throws Lena's cat to a wall. On the other hand, Martha inspects herself in front of the mirror in the bathroom, and Tracy looks at her battered face. At the same time, Maddie watches Lena revive her cat with a chant. Maddie then calls Martha, but Hannah is the one that responds. With this, they deduce that Martha and Hannah have exchanged bodies and realize that Hannah's wish before might have caused this consequence. As they all panic, Tracy gets a sudden urge to eat and goes to a neighbor's house to find some food. She then walks up to the house owner, Larry, leans in and heads to the kitchen to find something to eat. Back at Lena's house, Lena reveals that the girls died the previous night. She insists that she revived them using her magic, but Maddie only gets annoyed and refuses to believe her. However, Maddie changes her mind when Lena makes her feel both their heartbeats, making her realize that Lena is telling the truth. Meanwhile, Tracy throws up intensely after eating a ton of food and lets Larry hug her. The stone inside her wound then glows, just like the other girl's stones, and Tracy casually stabs Larry in the neck with her finger. Larry tries in vain to defend himself, but when the other cheerleaders arrive at his house and feast on his blood, he turns into a desiccated corpse. The girl's wounds then heal, and as Lena rejoices after proving her magic is real, Tracy tells them to get ready for school. At school, Terry happily flirts with the new students and introduces his teammates to the girls. However, Vic isn't in the mood to talk to them, and he even tries telling a teacher about the accident the previous night. At the same time, Maddie and her friends make their grand entrance, leaving Terry and his boys dumbfounded. During class, Tracy is grouped with one of Terry's teammates, Ben. Ben feels bad about what happened and wonders what he can do to make it up to Tracy, so without hesitation, she asks him for some drugs. Meanwhile, one of Lena's classmates sees her making her magic stones float and shares what he's seen with his friend. Unfortunately, Terry overhears their conversation. After the first period, Hannah feels uncomfortable being in her sister's body. But for once in her life, she's not in her sister's shadow anymore, and she quickly embraces her newfound confidence. In contrast, Martha struggles as she gets harassed by her classmates. Later on, Maddie approaches Terry as he flirts with the new students, and her presence makes the girls leave. Terry warns her not to mess with him, but Maddie refuses to be intimidated and makes sure the football captain knows she intends to kill him. However, their conversation is cut short when Maddie falls to the floor, moaning in pleasure. Terry and George then see her back glow, but they keep quiet about it and just leave. Struggling to walk, Maddie confronts Lena and asks for an explanation for what happened. So, Lena tells her they're all connected, which means if one feels something, the others feel it as well. 4 minutes earlier, Hannah cornered Manny in a bathroom and made out with him. She even removed her clothes and let Manny see and touch her sister's breasts, leaving the guy completely amazed. Hannah eventually made love with Manny, and although he found it weird that his girlfriend wanted to be called Hannah, he just chose to ignore it. While that was happening, Tracy was smoking weed with George in his van. As Tracy showed him her wound and her stone appeared, all the cheerleaders suddenly felt what Hannah was feeling. The stone then hit George in the face and instantly killed him, and Tracy didn't even feel guilty sucking his blood. Back in the present, Lena orders Tracy and Maddie to stop feeding while at school. Meanwhile, Terry watches Lena put her stones into her locker in the distance. George then informs him of Ben's death, and Terry chooses to keep what's happened to his teammate a secret. While Hannah is being affectionate with Manny, Martha watches with a sinister look. Once Hannah is gone, Martha confronts Manny and tells him to go with her to the woods. Feeling betrayed, Martha asks Manny why he slept with her sister. Confused, Manny quickly tries to leave, so Martha reveals that she's his girlfriend. Thinking she's joking, Manny tells her to stop and reveals that his teammates hate it when Martha bosses him around. This then infuriates Martha, so she chases after Manny and throws him to a tree. As Manny lies there dying, Martha absorbs all his blood. At the same time, George notices that Hannah's hip is glowing. Later that afternoon, Lena realizes that her stones are gone. She also notices that Maddie doesn't look well, so she lets her ex-girlfriend feed on her. On the other hand, Terry and George think of how to stop the cheerleaders since they feel like the girls are picking them off one by one. Terry then rams into Vic and stops him from leaving the team, telling the poor guy he won't just let him quit. In her room, Maddie realizes that she'll have to feed on human blood for the rest of her life. At the same time, Martha and Hannah fight, and Tracy continues to be her usual loud self. Fed up, Maddie instructs Martha and Lena to look after the girls while she showers. Meanwhile, Terry and George finally find Manny's body and decide to get Vic. Alone by the stairs, Hannah worries about Manny as he isn't answering her calls. She soon realizes that Martha has Manny's phone, and eventually, Martha confesses to killing him. Hurt, Hannah leaves the house just in time when Tracy discovers Maddie's video diary. Concurrently, Terry and George fail to locate Vic. Back in the room, Maddie walks in on the girls as they watch her video diary. Tracy is disappointed to learn Maddie's true intentions, and even though she tries to explain herself, Tracy refuses to listen to her. Tracy also throws Maddie to a bookshelf when she tries to stop her from leaving, and shortly, Martha follows her. Once Martha and Tracy are gone, Maddie reveals to Lena that Terry violated her while she was trying to make a tribute video for Alexis. That was also the time when she lost her bracelet, which Terry later gave to Tracy. Meanwhile, outside, Hannah gets kidnapped by Terry and George and has her stone carved out of her body by the football captain. At the same time, Martha comes to her sister's rescue upon hearing her screams. However, the girls are overpowered by their stones when Terry takes Hannah's. Terry also struggles to handle the magic stone, and soon, Martha rips off their vehicle's door. Upon realizing that Hannah is dead, Martha immediately kills George by smashing his head with a blunt object. Frightened, Terry swallows Hannah's stone and attacks Martha. Meanwhile, Vic shows up at Maddie's house and sees Maddie and Lena in distress. Then, Terry arrives with Martha, and he dislocates her shoulder in front of her friends to provoke the girls. He also taunts Vic and confesses to violating Maddie, leaving his friend in disbelief. Unfortunately, Maddie is too weak to fight Terry, so to regain her strength, she feeds on Vic. Insane with power, Terry leaves with Martha and dares her friends to come and get her. Maddie and Lena follow Terry on Vic's motorcycle, and Tracy goes after them, too, in a car. After the chase, they finally reach the cemetery. Martha's screams are heard, and as they approach, their stones start to heat up because Terry has just killed Martha and consumed her stone. After that, Terry quickly flees, and Maddie, Tracy, and Lena discover their dead friends' bodies. Enraged, Tracy follows Terry and falls into his trap. Meanwhile, Maddie almost falls into the trap, too, and tries her best to hold on to a branch, but when Terry abducts Lena, she eventually loses her strength and falls to where Tracy is. Moments later, Terry takes Lena near the gravestones, where her stone glows after Tracy dies. Terry wants to know the secret of the stones, but when Lena refuses to help him, he threatens to carve hers out of her body. Lena then tries to escape, but Terry eagerly throws his blade at her and incapacitates her. At the same time, Maddie apologizes to a dead Tracy for everything that's happened. Back near the gravestones, Lena desperately attempts to crawl away from Terry, but he casually pulls his blade out of her body and begins taking her stone. Luckily, Maddie arrives and hits him with a bear trap, giving Lena a chance to get away from him. Terry then focuses his attention on Maddie, unaware that he's dropped the rest of the stones that he's stolen from Lena's locker. As Maddie fights off Terry, Lena uses what little strength she has left and wills the stones to leave their bodies. However, after that happens, one of the stones sinks to the ground, and Maddie quickly dies. Lena's desperation then brings Maddie back to life, for another stone attaches itself to Maddie and grants what Lena wants. Unfortunately, the stone that sank to the ground resurrected an angry Alexis, leaving Lena and Maddie scared. This is all for Story Recap for today. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Tell us in the comments if you want us to recap your favorite movie. Watch other of our videos showing on the screen and leave a like because it helps the channel, and I would see you in the next video. Goodbye.